champions in 1901, 1906, 1907, and then in 1908, this amazing thing happens with AC Milan. He's considered arguably the greatest ever Italian footballer.
Really?
Yeah. He is like...
I suppose there was a good reason that they had to name the stadium after him, yeah.
So AC Milan now win titles 1951, 1955, 1957, 1959.
Hello there, this is If You Know Your History. My name's Mark Webster. He is Jonathan Tudor. What a middle name.
Very regal. It was
well
Welsh.
done. Was
Welsh.
it?
Yes.
Okay.
My great-grandmother's maiden name was Tudor. Her name was Mary Tudor. So it was a surname passed, unfortunately, to me. And as you know, in the 1970s, when substitute teachers went into class, they'd always announce your full name because they didn't know what your name was. And it would be much what I would call guffawing amongst my mates when they used to say Jonathan Tudor Owen. My teachers, my normal teacher would call Jonny, and I go, yes, sir. And then somebody would come in and go, Jonathan Tudor Owen. You haven't got a middle name, have you?
No, I haven't. No, I avoided all of that there. I was just a smiley fat kid.
There we go.
And I do like your mum's old castle, Mary Tudor. This is, If You Know History, as I just pointed out there, it's something that you can subscribe to for absolutely nothing. We're available everywhere you want to be. The exciting news today, John, we're a football podcast, but we're better than that because we're a football podcast with a hyphen in it today.
Yes, we are.
Because...
Football Milan. So explain why.
Because that's where football started in Milan with their football clubs when there were still hyphens in the word football.
That was indeed. And also, interestingly enough, Milan or Milano, as you'd say in Italian, but AC Milan are called AC Milan.
Yes.
For a very specific reason.
Indeed. There's two football clubs there, of course, as well we know, and extraordinarily successful they both are with
One grew out of the other.
This is the joy of it. Oof. And even better, John, we can trace its roots back to somewhere not far from where you and Mrs. Owen live.
Yes, Nottingham. Mansfield Road, Nottingham. I mean, fascinatingly as well, it's just coming up the 100th anniversary of the derby of these two very famous football clubs from the city of Milan, or Milano. But I'm just going to say, we're going to call it Milan as well, because John Metgod once said to me while driving to a Nottingham Forest game, he went to me, my name is Metgod, but so many English commentators used to try and go Metgod or Mechod or Mechod. And he went, in Holland, we don't care what you all call your cities and towns. We just call it the name we call it. And I think we've forgotten that a little bit in this country.
Yeah.
Camp Nou, my arse. It's the new camp.
Of course it is.
You know what I mean?
It takes me 15 seconds to try and move those two words around because I forget which direction they're meant to be going in.
Yes.
So I'm going to go with my instincts.
And me.
And of course, the thing is, it is a proper noun, Milan. We're not naming the city. Oh. This is the name of the football club. And that's for very good reasons because of one man who did not make exceedingly good cakes, Herbert Kilpin.
Herbert Kilpin, who was born in 1870 in Nottingham on Mansfield Road, as we just said. And like the vast majority of people in Nottingham at that time, ended up working in the lace industry because it was the world centre for lace making in Nottingham. Still vast areas of the city, as Mark knows, as a regular visitor, called the Lace Market. The museum there is famously done.
Brilliant buildings there.
Brilliant building.
They've kind of preserved the area lovely.
It's like the contemporary gallery's got the shape of a lace curtain in its design. So it's a city that was famously linked to the lace industry. And because of this reason, Herbert Kilpin ends up working in the lace industry and ends up in northern Italy. And he ends up first in Turin, and then Torino, Turin,
that's fair.
And then he ends up moving across to Milan. But like so many stories in world football history, Mark, he ends up taking something more than just his skill as a lace maker. He takes football with him
because he was a football player when he went out there as well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, where he grew up and one of the teams he played for is around an extraordinarily famous footballing patch of grass, which is the Wreck, isn't it, in Nottingham? Because that's basically ground zero for football in Nottingham, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And obviously Nottingham's got one of the most famous histories in football, in the sense Notts County are considered the oldest professional team. The old joke, who did they play against when they first formed? It took 3 years. Forest were formed pretty soon after. And also, he played for a team called Giuseppe Garibaldi. He played for a team that,
that name's associated with Forest, isn't it?
With Nottingham Forest, because they play in Garibaldi red. Obviously, Garibaldi is very famous in Italian history for unifying the country. So it's nice that it sort of ties together with this.
The fact that he goes to Italy as well does sort of like square the circle beautifully, doesn't it?
He's in but he's in Milan by the 1890s. And like I said, he takes football over with him. And he's sort of one of those... There's so many stories we're going to be able to tell over this next few years, hopefully doing this podcast, over the many podcasts to come, of these English people mostly taking this game and, you know, playing amongst the local workers, and then eventually the local workers took on kicking their ass in the game, forming teams and countries and all sorts, that end up winning far more World Cups than this. Because this is something very interesting about the British psyche when it comes to football. I include Wales in this and Scotland. We really did think, until Hungary started hammering everything in the mid-50s, you know, we didn't enter World Cups because we just thought we're going to win anyway.
That's right.
We're just much better than you in this game.
That's for other people. We don't need none of that. Yes.
That all, you know, fell on his head with Puskas and the Hungary team in the early 50s. So he goes over there and he forms this football and cricket club. Again, ties into all this story, Mark, of like cricket clubs. What do they do in the winter? Then they form football clubs, something for people to do. So they call the Milan Football and Cricket Club, and he's formed this in 1899, and it's got the we'll have some fun with this podcast. I'm gonna have a go, and Mark should have a go. Well, they form AC Calcio. Right, that's what the AC stands for. Associazione Calcio. That is AC Milan.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's what it is. I basically translate it as association football.
Oh, really? Simple as that?
Yeah.
Which, of course, gets back to the fact that they were still, if you look at the literature, it's foot-ball.
That's it.
That's what they're talking about in those days as well. I'm very pleased with that. I mean, I know you got the description, because he, of course, also invents the shirts.
He does.
And the colouring of it. I hate to bring this point up because you're going to like it. Milan, as a place, was founded in 1590 BC, was known as Medlanon, and was founded by the Celts.
Way!
They get literally everywhere.
We're more important than Jimmy Hill in the.
But you're right.
You're
right up there in that realm. It becomes Roman ultimately, but it carries half of that badge. Appears to be the cross of St. George. And my first thought was, well, that's obviously because perhaps Kilpin's brought that part of it as well, and decided he wants to add that to the badge. But in fact, it's the city's crest,
right?
And was actually put together for a pope that was born there, Gelasius I. Okay. So they had their own pope, and that was his symbol, which is why it ends up as one half of that badge, because the other half of the badge is the colours of the shirt, isn't it?
It is, which is famously red and black. And this comes from Herbert Kilpin. When he forms the team, he says we're going to play like a team of devils. Red like fire, black for fear.
I see. I really hope he did say that, because that is excellent, isn't it?
I know, yeah.
I mean, it's inspirational stuff, that is.
Your first game. Right, boys. That shirt you got on. Let me tell you what the colours stand for.
90 minutes later, 0-0.
Yeah,
but we're getting there, boys. We're getting there.
Well, the team that grew out of them, which we'll talk about also in this podcast, International or Internationalzi, they also had colours, and we'll explain their colours. Mark will have a go explaining what their colours are. This is very Italian. This is very Latin. There's a reason behind the colours. Although this comes from an Englishman, but he's obviously very much immersed himself in the culture. I think he's married an Italian woman at this point, all that kind of stuff. So he's more or less Italian. And the Italians, they get up and running quite quickly because they got a championship, which I think they called, what's it called? Scudetto. Scudetto, which you win. But they hit the ground running, AC Milan. They're champions in 1901, 1906, 1907, and then in 1908 this amazing thing happens with AC Milan, where they split over the signing of foreign players.
Yes,
and the flip out of this split, one set of people who run the football club went, well, we're going to sign foreign players, and they become, as I said, International Inter Milan.
Yes,
and AC Milan stay, and for 50 years, Mark, they don't sign a player who's not from Italy.
Now, you get that, and of course there is, somewhere in the middle of this there is a very dark part of Italian history, which of course is all based around World War II and the fascism that took place there. It still strikes me as ironic that they're digging their heels in so far about a football club founded by an Englishman.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Why be so sort of?
It doesn't kind of make sense, does it? I mean, I was good to do my notes because quite a few things are born out of this. So again, when they split Inter, let's call them Inter, right? You don't want to hear me saying that. Trying Italian. No, exactly. I don't want to inflict that on anybody.
Injury.
I meant to be able to speak Welsh. You think I could get my tongue around it, but I can't. Excuse the pun. And but like, if you think of it logically, right? They split, but they share the same ground. which is so unusual because we spoke about the Liverpool-Everton split over a ground, right? And there's a very innate thing in Britain where we almost hate ground sharing. Do you remember much like sort of Charlton hated playing at Palace and Wimbledon hated playing? Remember all those things that happened where people just... But for 100 years, a really famous... I'm going to have a go. The Derby della Madonna.
Very nice.
There we go. They have sort of revelled in the fact they've shared the same ground. It's really weird almost unto us, isn't it?
It's weird based on the fact that the closest we've ever got here really to that as a concept is what you've just described. Grudgingly sharing.
Yeah.
And perhaps for a year. You know, it might have been a couple of years here or there. You know,
fans hate it, don't they, over here?
Yeah. I guess it's obvious because it would have started that way. If we'd have started off as football clubs that did just share, that stadiums were just that.
Yeah.
They were just the canvas on which you did your art. But no, they're an integral part of the supporting process in this country, aren't they?
And we'll come to this.
Yeah.
Obviously, they share the San Siro, which, interestingly enough, I always say this, I know, but it is interestingly enough, isn't the name of the ground, it's the name of the area.
Correct, which, as I can now confirm, is interesting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And they do what they do now for their 100th anniversary together. But the only thing I can think of that's similar is Hampden Park had for 100 years what was called the Celtic and the Rangers End.
Right.
So whenever they played each other in cup finals or in league finals, as they did many, many times, league cup finals, a certain part of the ground always went to Rangers and a certain part of the ground always went to Celtic because they played each other so much. This wouldn't have happened in English football because Wembley, the finals tend to be,
sure.
And that's the only thing I can think of that's very similar. But each club has an end.
Yeah.
And I was trying to work out, do they swap for away games?
Well,
and I started getting really confused, thinking, I don't know.
Well, it's one of those ones when you think, oh, okay, so they do that. Then when you think about the actual practical nature of it all, i.e., do you have to keep changing the name on the front of it for each time they're playing at home?
Maybe somebody can tell us.
Take away the black and the red colours and put in the other. Which, on that note, I suppose it's worth pointing out now that let's discuss the way that they do get split. It's the colours, by the way.
Yeah.
Our crest, as they say, black and blue against a backdrop of stars. Because we are brothers of the world, by the way, is how they like to describe
international
their approach and their livery. The logo was actually created by one of the 43 people split. So this was quite a big organisation. The original AC Milan lost 43 club members to go away and form Inter. And the logo was designed by Giorgio Mugiani.
Yeah.
And the reason I like him, he's a graphic artist anyway, apparently. So he seemed like the right man for the job. And it's a really cool badge as well. It's that one with the eye with the split M. It looks very contemporary. Did very nicely. This had been a great job. He went from Moto Guzzi to Pirelli to Shinzano and then to Martini.
Did he?
And that is a working life that I could also embrace. I mean, to be honest with you, you want to be working at Shinzano and Martini at the same time, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So you can get a nice cocktail out of that one, can't you? But that's what Giorgio was doing.
Those adverts.
Oh, try a taste of Giorgio's best jobs. But they were a team that, as you say, kind of went on to embrace the idea of bringing in foreign players. They used that name. They had to shut that down, of course, during the war, didn't they?
Yeah, well, especially to the fascist era under Mussolini. So Mussolini comes in, he's a fascist leader. Franco's very similar in Spain. Anglicization, anglicised. There we go.
Anglicised it.
There we go. So Athletic Bilbao, because they were formed by Englishmen, are Athletic Club Bilbao.
Yes.
That's a nod to their sort of heritage. He says, no, forget that, you're Atletico. So he made them change it. Very similar in Italy. He didn't like the names of AC Milan. So there was an idea with names that he had to change it, and international especially. When you're a nationalistic fascist leader, you don't want to be talking about people that want to bring people from all over the world to come and play for you. So he changed that. So they became Unione Sportiva Milanese. How was that?
That was very good indeed.
The fans always called him Inter.
I was going to say, Sport Club of Milan,
yeah.
But yes, because of course what you're trying to do, you're trying to sound grandiose and single-minded about your bigotry.
And they give up in 1931, even when Mussolini's in power. They just go, just call it Inter. They've actually just got, there's
Which
no
is
point.
quite bold, I imagine, in that environment.
I was going to say, really, I was a bit like, wow. And I mean, the Inter thing is interesting. Like, and we're going to talk about this. Their first captain dies in the First World War. They've got this idea, again, a bit like the AC Milan thing, where the colours black and blue, this wonderful night, against the backdrop of stars. We are brothers, as you said. So this idea of duty, of looking after one another. And in the First World War, of course, the Italians were on the side of the Allies,
right.
Sides of the British and the French against the Germans, all that kind of stuff. But I've got to come back to Herbert Kilpin, because there's quite an interesting but sad end to his story. He doesn't last very long. He marries an Italian girl, Maria Cupia. I mean, this is going to be, Italians listen to this are going to be like going, Jonny. He dies in Milan, aged 46, right, in 1916, so right in the middle of the First World War, due to his excessive drinking and smoking.
Good Lord.
Yeah, so he's obviously, he's fallen by the wayside, poor Herbert. But in the 1990s, an AC Milan, an interesting group of fans tried to track down his grave mark, and they found him in the municipal cemetery in the Protestant area, with no name and no thing, just a number.
The fall from grace is astounding. Because,
it is.
I mean, strangely enough, I learned his name from the time that you and I spent in Nottingham together when you and I were working together, and tucked away in the Lace Market, someone built a pub called the Herbert Kilpin.
They did.
And I'm looking and saying, who's this fella then?
And there's a plaque now.
I learned about him through the beer mat.
Yeah, but there's a plaque above the shop. I think it was a butcher's, where his father and mother were. So they're trying. And obviously, because they're such a hugely famous club now, they made a little film about it, and they want to commemorate him, quite rightly. So I thought, just touch of class here. In 1999, on their centenary year, they built a new tombstone in the monumental graveyard, which is the most famous graveyard in Milan, which is lovely, isn't it? But then it gets even better. In 2010, Kilpin's body is finally put in the Famiado, F-A-M-E-D-I-O, which is the main building in the monumental graveyard, which is kept for the city's most celebrated and loved people.
Good Lord. So, he couldn't have fallen lower, and now he couldn't have risen higher.
Absolutely. It just goes to show history is the great truth revealer.
Yeah.
You will find your place in history by your actions in life. And now he's considered, it's become a sort of a pilgrimage for AC Milan fans to go to, and for fans who are like fans of the game and him to go and lay some flowers out. Isn't that a nice ending to that story?
Which is great. And of course, it keeps the hyphen alive.
Yes.
Because of course it was still football with a hyphen when he was playing the game. And as you say, the joy of this is it's a man who did what he kind of felt natural.
Yeah.
He played a bit of football and he worked in the textile industry, and he kind of did both things. But of course, the football took off. And lest we forget, Milan really is the centre of the fashion industry, certainly one of the big four in the entire world. So it's no surprise at all that he would end up in Milan working in textiles, because he's working in one of the four biggest cities in the world that are fashion hubs.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really interesting sort of like, I don't know, journey for this lad who goes over, forms what's now one of the most famous football clubs in the world, gets forgotten about, which happens, and then sort of resurrected, and this old sort of a film made about him, say plaques in his home city, moved to this amazing graveyard, and sort of celebrated for being one of the founding fathers of football in Europe. I mean, there's some are disputed. Somebody even claimed that he's the first English player playing football in Europe on the continent. I don't know if that's quite true, but that's what they're claiming.
It's very close.
Very close.
Very close.
So, I mean, what an amazing guy, really. Like the fact that the guy he works for, Mark, when he goes to Turin, I love this, is a guy called Edoardo Bossio. And he's Italian-Swiss, who keep popping up in our podcast.
Well, they do.
Like Peter Bonetti.
And the Swiss are integral as well in the break, because there's a lot of Swiss-connected AC Milan players who end up becoming part of the Inter squad, because the Swiss are one of the big foreign contingents in the town.
That's right.
I'm going to work on the principle that they're next-door neighbours, and I don't know if that's true.
Who's that?
Switzerland and Italy.
I think they're pretty close. Well, it's a big mountain range between them. They share the mountain range.
They share the
Tyrol, isn't it?
The famous one with the snow on it. It's that one, isn't it? Here, listen, let's take a break. We haven't asked the question. How about you mentioned it? It's
the stadium.
San Siro is not called the San Siro. So what is it called? Should we do that when we come back?
When we come back, we shall reveal the name.
Okay, welcome back to the second part of If You Know Your History. It's football with a hyphen because we're in Milan and it's a great footballing city. It's a great footballing city, Jonny Owen, with one football stadium in it, which everyone calls the San Siro. But I'm delighted to say it's an opportunity for you to try your Italian pronunciations again by giving us the real name.
Well, I think people have quite enjoyed this.
I had letters, and it's only been 2 minutes since you said it.
Okay, so everybody calls it the San Siro, one of the most famous sporting stadiums in the world. It's called the San Siro. That's the area, but the actual name of it, which I think is what it's called mostly in Italy, is the Stadio Giuseppe Meazza.
Oh, that was really good.
Thank you.
That's ruined it.
Oh, well, I had to
There'll be some others that you can't, that you'll bangle, wouldn't there?
Well, I had to get this right, see, because this is where this podcast can be fantastic, and I think this is why people will really enjoy this. Giuseppe Meazza is a name that I guarantee most British people would not have heard of. Have you never heard of him?
No, never.
He's considered arguably the greatest ever Italian footballer.
Really?
Yeah. He is like...
I suppose there was a reason that they had to name the stadium after him, yes.
I suppose if he were Italian, he'd be like Billy Wright. You know, we'd go,
wow,
well, famous to us, you know, captain of England, you know, so famous, married to one of the Beverly sisters, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
You know? Giuseppe Meazza, you know, deserves... we could almost do a podcast just on him on his own. He was the winner of 2 World Cups. He wins 2 World Cups. He played 53 times for Italy, right, scoring 33 goals. Okay, his father died in the First World War, which we should just touch on a little bit because Inter have this incredible history. Their captain, Virgilio Fossati, he died in the First World War. He died fighting around Trieste in a massive battle, the 6th Battle of Isonzo between the Italian and Austrian armies, where 80,000 people.
Good Lord.
What's great about doing this history was these battles, Mark. We all think the First World War is the Western Front because it's a Somme, because that affects us.
Yes.
But these other battles in the world that sometimes, and it's a bit like...
There are other fronts that we need to know about.
And it's a bit like that with football. Giuseppe Meazza is somebody that we should know about in this country because he was astonishing. He played his first game for them in 1929. He straight away starts scoring goals. His nickname is the Genius. Right? He's considered a bit of a playboy. I was like, I love the sound of this guy. He wins the first Italian Cup for him at 39. So again, he's a bit of a hero. He scores 31 goals in his debut season when he comes in. I mean, he is considered like Italy's, like I said, 2 World Cups, 284 goals in 408 games. But here's the kicker. He goes to AC Milan and plays as well. That's why they named the stadium after him.
Well, I was about to say he crossed the divide. He didn't.
Crossed the divide.
He crossed the halfway line. I mean, they didn't have to go anywhere, did they?
No, exactly.
Change dressing rooms.
He did. But you see, the thing is, this is it's an interesting thing in the history. AC Milan really don't embrace international footballers until the 50s, and I'll come to who they embrace.
Oh, it's that late, is it?
That late. And they don't win that much.
No.
Whereas Inter, because they're much more of an international team, they tend to win more tournaments.
20 titles. I'm looking 9 cups, 8 Super Cups, 6 European trophies, you know, European Cup and Champions League. They have been... And they've got the head-to-head record. So they very much got the upper hand in Milan.
Never been relegated.
No.
Never been relegated, Serie A. So AC Milan famously were for... Remember, there was a bit of dodgy stuff going on. Yes, we all know what happened there. But Meazza's fascinating because I think, like saying, somebody that's considered one of the greatest Italian players ever, his nickname was the Genius. He's still the 2nd highest international goal scorer for Italy. Isn't that remarkable? At a time when
you madness.
You didn't play. No, when you didn't play internationals that much, you played in World Cups basically.
If they'd have bothered to call the stadium its actual name, we may have been a bit more clued up.
And also, is there something slightly arrogant in us that we don't call it that?
There's a lot arrogant in us not calling it that.
If a stadium's named after one of the greatest ever players who played for both these clubs,
show the respect it deserves.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I'm going to call it? I'm going to call it the Joe. Because it's easier. And from this point forward, the San Siro is going to be called the Joe.
Okay,
and by the way, the Joe was built in 1872. The AC Milan president, having thrown it up, liked the San Siro area because he also had his race course there.
Okay.
Surname of Pirelli.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Is there a connection?
There's a lot of rubber going on. And they made it. They started out making scooper suits. The tyres came relatively later.
Yeah.
He throws up. Milan's a beautiful contemporary city, and there's a place called the Pirelli Tower, which was built in the 50s, which was like cutting edge modern. And Italy's not known for cutting edge modern, is it? It's a country which I think wallows in its own nostalgia, and quite right too, because it's got the look. Yeah. But Milan looks brand spanking new. And of course, Pirelli become the famous tyre manufacturer.
Yeah.
But have been associated with football and AC Milan for ever and ever and ever. And there's also a great moment where they brought a lot of controversy to the table, but arguably, perhaps it was to their advantage anyway, any publicity being good publicity, is when Ronaldo was replaced in Brazil and Rio de Janeiro with him wearing that shirt doing his celebration instead of Christ the Redeemer statue. So they used an advert in which Ronaldo was up there instead of Jesus Christ, him's very self.
And that went down
got in
well,
got in a little bit of trouble over that one there in 1998. But of course, it brings us back to that point. The Joe remains to this day a shared space. There's been talk about adding a second stadium because they've got the Olympics coming up and they're going to have to mess with the San Siro. So there's talk, but they're talking about
Giuseppe Meazza, come on,
Joe, and as a result of it, they're going to have to sort of adapt that to become an Olympics stadium.
Yep.
So the plan A to help with that is to build another stadium.
Okay.
Next door. They can't even. The first thought is not even to go, well, okay, let's take advantage.
Stick it at the other end of the city.
Exactly. Let's do something. There's more of an AC end than there is an Inter end.
Yeah.
But they still want to do that. And it's worth thinking about in that kind of context. Now, you've had it with your team. I've had it with my team. Even just moving grounds in British football.
Yeah.
Is felt like you've just lost an arm and a leg, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
but that is culturally our thing, isn't it?
I mean, you've moved a stadium. Just quickly, I want to ask about this. You moved to the London Stadium. I've been there. It's a fine stadium.
Yeah.
It was built for the Olympics.
Olympic stadium, yeah.
But you're quite okay about going there, aren't you?
On two levels, the two fundamentals that made me happy were, first of all, people who treated the bowling ground as a sacred space in which, if you listen to them, we won 8-0 every time we played.
Yeah.
Where, in fact, we often went down and it could be full of disgusting, horrible, poisonous people.
Yeah.
So I couldn't be romantic about it like that for that reason. So I had to be pragmatic. It's gone. But the other reason I embraced the new place is because about the very first game I went to, two of my grandsons came with me. And they walked up the steps and looked out onto the sort of the panoramic vista of the ground, and they were in awe of the place.
Yeah,
and it just reminded me, this is for them, not for me.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a very European way of looking at it, Mark. Well done, you.
Well, thank you very much. I like to think of myself in those terms, which is why I don't try and pronounce any of the words in the language.
I thought I'd have a go on it.
You did it with Cardiff, though.
Well, do you know? I'm again talking about sort of Europe. I think it's really interesting when I started looking into this. Obviously, there was Kilpin, but looking at Giuseppe Meazza is a player there that I hadn't really heard of.
No.
And I'm being honest there, and I like to think I know my history, but I was like fascinated by this, and I thought there'd be something similar we could do with AC Milan, because, like I said, Inter Milan kind of dominated in the first part of the 20th century.
Completely.
But then by the 50s, AC Milan sort of get rid of this idea, and they bring in, and again, three players that I'd never heard of, and then I spent like 3 days falling down this rabbit hole going, this blew my mind as well, a bit like what I was saying about the great Italian player. So they brought in 3 Swedish players, Mark, right?
So this is kind of they're breaking their own.
Yeah. What happens is,
right.
Sweden win the Olympics gold medal in 1948, right? Which was in London, famously, wasn't it?
Yes.
So they go to London and they see these 3 Sweden, great foresight here. AC Milan go, right, we're going to break out this idea and sign these 3 players. And these 3 players they signed, right? Gunnar Gren.
Nice.
Right, there we go. Gunnar Nordahl.
2 Gunners.
Yeah. And Nils Liedholm.
Nice.
Okay, so 3 Swedish lads, right? All played in this 48-game gold medal winners, blah, blah, blah. So you think, oh, okay, this is decent. In Italy, this is known as the Grenoli, which is taking 2 letters from each name. So Grenoli.
Oh, yeah.
This is known as the Grenoli era. So AC Milan now win titles 1951, 1955, 1957, 1959.
3
Swedish
amateur Scandinavians.
Yes.
Transform a whole football club.
Transform a whole football club. They got 3 incredible nicknames. So Gunnar Green, he's a little bit older. He's called the Professor. Obviously in Italian. Yeah,
he wears glasses when he's not playing.
Yes,
yeah, got it.
So he's considered like, the guy who's the brains behind it all, a little bit older. This is the boy. Gunnar Nordahl, his nickname is the Prime Gunner. Right? Check this out, Mark. 257 games,
Yeah.
256 goals.
Oh, that's like Donald Bradman, 99.9.
It's ridiculous.
Not out. Oh,
I was
my
a bit like,
goal
sorry?
a game virtually.
Who's this guy? He's still, look at this, he's still considered the greatest goal scorer in the history of Serie A. I'm like, what? This fella, like, he was like 5 times winner of the top goal scorer. He was like utterly fated, adored in Italy, adored in Sweden. Check this out, Sweden. 33 games for Sweden, 43 goals, right? But this is the sticker mark, right? The other one after him, Nils Lidholm, he's considered the Baron. Do you know why he's called the Baron?
Oh, go on.
Because he's married to a countess in Italy.
Well, that's probably literally true then.
Yeah, who could trace her family back 1,000 years? I'm like, who is this guy? 23 games for Sweden, 12 goals. I'm just going to touch on Sweden here. And if you're Swedish out there, I mean, like, how you're going to be so annoyed with this. Sweden won't pick them.
Because they've dared to break
No,
away.
they're professional. They don't pick amateurs.
Oh, my word.
So the 3 best players in the world, arguably, that people are saying in the 50s, were Swedes. It gets better. You just go, no. When they host the World Cup in 58, they bring them back, try to. Poor Gunnar Nordal's got, he's a bit too old. Gunnar Green is like 38. Nidholm is in his 30s.
That's the Baron. How's the Baron going?
But them, they say, they break every sinew as old men. They get to the final, Mark.
They
Nearly win it, and they say they beat a brilliant West Germany team in the semi-final. They lose to Brazil, unfortunately, a great Brazil team. But they go, what if everybody in Sweden now goes, historians, what if they'd allowed them to play in the 50s, the 54 World Cup, which is in Switzerland? Why didn't they let them play?
They lost in the World Cup when Brazil was invented.
Yes.
They were unlucky enough to have that Pele Brazil, weren't they?
Unbelievable. So these 3 lads, I mean, like, I was going, this is getting more and more bonkers all the time.
Do they know that the word Gunnar translates really brilliantly into a striker, or is that just us?
I don't know.
Because we are talking about 3 languages we've got to try and get across here. Yeah. The Italians getting a Swedish word that sounds like an English word for someone who shoots very well.
Yeah.
So I hope they got that.
Grenoli. So if you're listening to this podcast and you go now to Italy on holidays, or you travel there, or you meet an Italian or somebody Swedish, just go, you know what? Giuseppe Meazza, what a player he was. I guarantee he'll be there for half an hour and won't have to pay for a drink. Same if we go to Sweden and Scandinavia and go, yeah, Grenoli, what players they were. If only they play for Sweden. Again, I bet you'll be there for an hour talking. And you just realise doing this podcast that sometimes we are so Anglo-centric in this country, aren't we? That we just don't see that other countries have this fabulous, rich history with great players going and changing football.
And just some is that, and even in our arrogance, that Sweden had any real influence in the world of football anyway.
Yeah.
Well, of course they did, and on an amateur and indeed professional level. And by the way, it's the start of the best joke ever: 3 Swedes and an Englishman walking into a pub. So and form a football team with a hyphen in it. Yeah, no, it's golden.
So Mark, Nils Lidholm, your favourite, the Baron, he has a pretty illustrious career as a manager as well. He's sort of they reckon he invents zonal marking. He talks about spider's web passing, which I think is fantastic. He's massively influenced, obviously, by Total Football, but he's winning like Scudettos with Fiorentina in 1979. He's also the manager of Roma in the Bruce Grobbelaar final. Remember the wobbly legs final? He's the manager of Roma at that game. So this guy is like sort of so famous in Italy, not just as a player, but as a manager too. And I have to be honest with you, I was a bit like, I was really into football at that point. I was thinking, who is this guy? It's incredible, isn't it? This Swedish guy, the Baron.
And of course, the fact that it's the Dutch neighbour picks up on something so brilliant and then transforms the Dutch into being what the Swedish could have been.
And look at our leagues now, Mark, full of innovative foreign coaches and managers. He was a bandy player. Do you know what bandy is, Mark?
I do. He couldn't stop a pig in a passage. As my dear mother-in-law used to say.
So basically, I walked into that one. I didn't even set it up. Anyway, a bandy player it's almost like a football-sized pitch of ice. So it's like outdoor hockey. So it's much bigger than what you'd call an ice hockey rink, which is inside a building.
Right.
It's like outside hockey, and it's a very Scandinavian Swedish thing. So it's almost like 11-a-side pitch playing with hockey.
Well, it's born out of its environment.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yes.
Well, when I was DJing once in Stockholm, and the lads I was DJing with, it was a famous British night called Bangers and Mash, packed there full of kids, Swedish kids, play anything as well. Play like Jacques Dutronc, Sex Pistols, The Doors. They loved it. Bit of soul, Georgie Fame. Really knew their stuff, these kids. And these 2 lads were Hammarby fans, which is a team in Stockholm, Sweden, a famous team. So the next day they said to me, look, there's no football match on. Do you want to go and see a bandy game? And obviously I was like, okay. So I went to watch this game, which is outside in the house, really fast. And when I was walking to the ground, I'll never forget this, they went, we're going to buy a newspaper. Make sure I will buy you a newspaper. And obviously I'm thinking, I can't read a word of Swedish. What are you talking about? And what they did, and I was like, oh, this is Mark Webster territory. You get on the terrace, Mark, you bung your paper down, you stand on it, because it stops the cold getting up through your feet.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
Insulation.
Yeah, insulation. Isn't that lovely?
Well, basically, the good news is it improves the newspaper circulation and your circulation.
Exactly.
It does both jobs.
Nils Lidholm was a top bandy player, and Mark, he finished his years. Again, this episode could be written for Mark Webster, and he ran a vineyard.
Oh!
My mate Mark likes a drop of wine.
He lived the dream, John. I mean, basically, for 30 years, he should have been sitting on a leather Chesterfield in a smoking jacket, drinking warm brandy in front of a fire.
No.
He chose not to.
He's
but he earned that reward at the end.
Oh.
He's basically the kid in the candy store.
In that beautiful story, these three AC Milan Swedish players who became absolute legends in Italy, a bit like John Charles. We could do an episode on John Charles.
Oh, totally.
Had a very similar thing with Juventus, famously. But and they all lament the fact that the prime gunner, who's kind of my favourite, I like the oldie fella as well, I like Professor, but the Baron's Marks boy, the prime gunner, he was just too old in 58.
Yeah.
And he was the goal machine in the sense of, like, he had a goal a game ratio. A goal a game ratio.
That's nuts.
And that would have been like a big moment.
But they had an astounding life.
Oh.
Because who wouldn't want to live in, who's someone who's playing in a relatively wintry country
Yes.
and not getting paid to play,
Yeah.
gets to move to Milan,
the 50s.
the cutting edge of Italy, and get paid for the privilege as well. So well done, those three boys.
Well done. So I'm just going to tap back on obviously, because there's so much in Milan's history that we are going to go call back, and we could talk about the great AC Milan team of the 90s. There's Inter Milan teams who have done fantastic in the last 15 years as well. But just a final thing as well to obviously Herbert Kilpin, who's now quite rightly held in esteem in that wonderful football city with his rightful place in the famous graveyard. But Giuseppe Meazza, Stadio Giuseppe Meazza, and I just want to leave it with this fact, which is great. Afterwards, after playing, this is how famous he was. He became a famous pundit. And he was eccentric and animated. I love the sound of this fella. Often popping up on television. And there's one point where he finally gets overtaken as the lead Italian goal scorer. And we leave with this. He apparently famously replied, well, he's had more games to play than me, haven't he?
Good man. He's like Jeff Boycott of the football world. Actually, I would like to say, because you mentioned their sort of local fans, one of their biggest fans, the dear departed Kobe Bryant.
Yes.
Massive AC Milan fan, because his dad, Joe, who played basketball in the NBA, moved to Italy and played basketball in Italy. And Kobe Bryant, between the ages of 6 and 13, grew up in Italy. And he spoke fluent Italian, and he's a massive football fan. And Kobe got to the Milan side of the one that you're talking about, the two European Championships team that included Baresi, Donadoni, and Carlo Ancelotti.
It's not a bad team, is it?
So that was the AC Milan team that Kobe grew up with and loved.
There you go.
Great news.
Lots more to come back on that.
Totally.
We hope you enjoyed hearing about the early history of these two magnificent football clubs and that amazing footballing city. Make sure you prescribe. Make sure you subscribe, download us, share us, and let people know when you find things out about. And do a bit of research.
Yeah.
If you want to Google these players.
Please
honestly,
feel free to send any information about Johnny's pronunciation of Italian words. Actually, no, don't. I haven't got enough time in the day.
Bella.